You might find it hard to process the scenes coming through right now. In the Strait of Hormuz, that absolutely vital artery for global energy flows, an Iranian unmanned aerial vehicle got taken out in mere seconds by a tool that feels pulled straight from tomorrow's battlefield. No conventional rocket, no bursting shells, just a quiet, invisible stream of focused power. This marks a genuine historic first for the United States. High-energy laser systems have now seen real, large-scale use in actual combat. A 60-kilowatt directed energy unit locked onto the incoming Iranian drone and incinerated it from the sky almost immediately. This is Political Insight Live, and right here I'm taking you deep inside everything that just unfolded in the Strait of Hormuz. You'll get the kind of thorough, boots-on-the-ground breakdown you won't encounter anywhere else. Let me walk you through exactly what took place. An Iranian UAV was spotted heading straight for American warships. Rather than launching a $1 million defensive missile, U.S. crews brought two breakthrough systems online. First, the Odin optical dazzling interdictor for naval forces instantly blinded the drone's sensors and guidance. Then the Helios high-energy laser engaged, delivering a steady that compromised the UAV's frame and sent it spiraling uncontrollably into the water. This was no drill or demonstration. It was genuine combat, the first major operational employment of directed energy weapons by the U.S. military against a real enemy threat. Pause for a moment and consider what that really means. One laser shot costs about as much as a few gallons of fuel, basically just electricity from the ship's own power plant. Compare that to a standard missile that can run $2 million each. Iran's whole drone swarm playbook rested on the hope that cheap Shahed units could drain American stockpiles dry. That entire calculation just went up in literal flames. Having followed every twist in this crisis closely, I can tell you with complete confidence that what we saw was far bigger than one successful intercept. It signals the opening chapter of a new age in naval conflict, one where America enjoys a commanding technological lead that Iran cannot hope to close anytime soon. The IRGC now stares at a nightmare scenario. Their most reliable asymmetric tools are being neutralized for virtually no cost to the United States, and this is only the beginning. In the rest of this discussion, I'll take you step by step through Iran's largest coordinated assault on U.S. forces in the Strait, how it was completely dismantled, the powerful American counterstrike that followed, and the reasons Iran's long-held plan to control Hormuz is crumbling before our eyes. If you're looking for the real story behind the headlines, the one that actually shapes the region's future and global energy stability, stay right here until the end. This is going to be one of the most important updates you see all week. And if you're new to the channel or haven't hit subscribe yet, go ahead and do that now while turning on notifications. We're tracking this situation hour by hour, and you won't want to miss what comes next. But the next developments drove the crisis into an even riskier phase. After watching their shadow vessel approach, neutralized, and their first drone eliminated by American lasers, the IRGC decided it was time to commit everything. In a last-ditch attempt to reassert dominance over the Strait of Hormuz, Iran unleashed its biggest coordinated assault on U.S. naval forces in the area to date. They threw every available asset into what they called a saturation offensive, a classic swarm designed to overwhelm American defenses. Hundreds of kamikaze drones darkened the sky. Dozens of high-speed IRGC attack boats raced across the waves. Ballistic missiles roared from inland sites while cruise missiles hugged the surface. all of it aimed squarely at 3 American Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, the USS Truckton, the USS Rafael Peralta, and the USS Mason. The IRGC plan was brutally straightforward. Flood the area with so many threats from so many directions that the U.S. Navy would burn through its expensive missiles and eventually run short. They counted on their low-cost Shahed drones and suicide boats to finally break through. I've been following this moment by moment, and I can tell you the tension that night was off the charts. For several long minutes, the sky above the strait lit up with tracer rounds and explosions. Iranian units had gone all in. This was no probe. This was their masterstroke. The moment they hoped would force America to back down or accept real losses. Yet the outcome was devastating, and not for the United States. Not a single Iranian weapon reached its target. Not one American sailor was hurt. Not one ship took damage. The U.S. defense was layered, coordinated, and ruthlessly effective. The Aegis combat system on the destroyers tracked and prioritized hundreds of incoming threats at once. SM-2 and SM-6 missiles handled ballistic and cruise threats at long range. AH-64 Apache helicopters from nearby platforms rained Hellfire missiles and 30mm chain gunfire onto the swarm of fast boats, turning many into burning wrecks before they could close the distance. And for the first time in major combat, the new directed energy laser systems, Odin and Helios, sliced through wave after wave of drones with clinical accuracy. What Iran hoped would be an overwhelming assault turned into a one-sided rout. Their costly ballistic missiles were swatted from the sky. Their prized fast attack boats were shredded by Apache gunships. Their drone swarm, the very asset they relied on to exhaust American defenses, was systematically wiped out at almost zero cost to U.S. forces. This went far beyond a failed attack. It was a catastrophic proof that Iran's entire sea denial doctrine no longer works. The IRGC had staked everything on the idea that sheer numbers and cheap weapons could overcome American technology. That wager has now literally gone up in smoke. The psychological shock inside the Revolutionary Guard must have been enormous. They had promised their leaders and their proxies a decisive victory. Instead, they delivered a public humiliation seen around the world. But the IRGC refused to accept the new reality. Even while their assault was collapsing in real time, they were already preparing what they saw as the next phase. Stay with me, because what happened immediately afterward was even more striking. The United States did not simply absorb the blow and wait. Within hours of Iran's failed saturation attack, America delivered a response that was as precise as it was devastating. This was no impulsive retaliation. It was a meticulously planned counterstrike executed by F-35 Lightning II stealth fighters. The targets were 4 critical Iranian command and support nodes along the northern shore of the Strait of Hormuz, Bandar Abbas, Keshem Island, Minab, and Bandar Kamir. I've studied the pattern of these strikes closely, and what stands out is their surgical nature. These were not broad-area bombardments. They were pinpoint operations designed to cripple the IRGC's ability to coordinate any further attacks in the strait. In Bandar Abbas, Iran's largest naval base in the region, F-35s hit the main IRGC command center and the primary radar installation that had been guiding their missile and drone operations. The facility that once served as the nerve center for tracking American warships was reduced to rubble in minutes. On Keshem Island, the strikes targeted hardened underground facilities used for drone storage and launch preparation. Satellite imagery released shortly afterward showed multiple secondary explosions, clear evidence that munitions and fuel depots were destroyed deep inside the mountain bunkers the IRGC thought were safe. In Minab, the focus was on logistics and fast attack boat staging areas. The Benhavik and Tricon supply piers, where high-speed IRGC vessels were being refueled and rearmed, were taken out with devastating accuracy. Several patrol boats were caught pierside and destroyed before they could even leave port. And in Bandar Kamir, the strikes neutralized a key coastal missile coordination point and a forward drone command post, the very node responsible for directing the swarm attacks that had just failed so spectacularly. What makes this counterstrike truly remarkable is the level of preparation behind it. This was not an emotional reaction to being attacked. U.S. intelligence had clearly maintained an updated target package for exactly this scenario. The moment Iran committed its forces in a major assault, America already had the coordinates, the timing windows, and the precise weapons selected. The F-35s operated with near-total impunity. Their stealth capabilities allowed them to penetrate Iranian air defense zones that only a few years ago would have been considered extremely high risk. No American aircraft were endangered. No pilots were lost. The entire operation was over in under 40 minutes, yet its effects will be felt for months. For the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, this was more than a tactical defeat. It was a strategic catastrophe. In one night, they lost central command nodes that coordinated their entire sea denial operation, multiple long-range radar systems that provided early warning, key logistical hubs for their fast attack boat fleet, and several forward drone bases that formed the backbone of their swarm tactics. The IRGC had spent years and billions building this layered defense network along the strait. Much of it is now burning or buried under concrete. I can tell you with complete confidence that this counterstrike has fundamentally altered the balance of power in the Strait of Hormuz. The force that once boasted it could close the strait will suddenly found its eyes blinded, its command chain broken, and its most important forward bases crippled. The psychological impact inside Tehran must have been profound. The same IRGC commanders who ordered the massive swarm attack were now forced to watch their carefully constructed infrastructure go up in flames, delivered by an enemy they could barely even detect. Yet even after this punishing blow, the IRGC's nightmare was far from over. Stay with me, because what I'm about to break down next is perhaps the most important military technological shift we have seen in this entire crisis. Iran's entire approach in the Strait of Hormuz has been built on one core assumption. Cheap, mass-produced drones can bleed the United States dry. A single Shahed 136 drone costs between $20,000 and $30,000. In contrast, a standard SM-2 or SM-6 fired from American destroyers can cost up to $2 million per shot. The IRGC believed that flooding the sky with hundreds of low-cost UAVs would eventually exhaust U.S. missile stockpiles and create an opening for their manned assets to break through. That strategy just died in the waters of the Strait of Hormuz. For the first time in large-scale combat, the United States has deployed directed energy laser systems at scale, and the results have been nothing short of revolutionary. The Odin system and the Helios high-energy laser didn't just participate in the defense, they dominated it. Here's exactly how it worked. When the Iranian drone swarm approached, American warships did not immediately reach for their expensive missile tubes. Instead, they activated their solid-state lasers. The Odin optical dazzling interdictor first blinded the incoming drones, burning out their optical sensors and GPS guidance in fractions of a second. Moments later, the more powerful Helios 60-kilowatt laser locked on and delivered a sustained invisible beam of concentrated energy. The drone's composite wings began to smoke, its electronics melted, and within seconds the entire UAV spiraled uncontrollably into the sea. I've analyzed hours of available footage and after-action reports, and the pattern is crystal clear. Each laser engagement lasted between 5 and 15 seconds. The cost per shot is essentially the price of running a high-powered air conditioner for a few minutes, just electricity generated by the ship's own reactors and generators. This is what I call the infinite magazine effect. While Iran must manufacture, transport, and launch thousands of physical drones, the United States can keep firing its lasers as long as the ship has fuel to generate electricity. There is no practical limit to the number of intercepts, no reload time, no multi-million-dollar price tag for every kill. The economic asymmetry that Iran counted on has been completely reversed. Think about the strategic earthquake this represents. For years, Iran and its allies have promoted the narrative that drone swarms are the great equalizer, a way for a less advanced military to challenge the world's most powerful navy. That narrative collapsed the moment the first Shahed drone was burned out of the sky by a silent laser beam. The IRGC's cheap drone doctrine, which they invested billions into developing, has been rendered obsolete in a single night of combat. Even more devastating for Iran is the psychological and operational impact. Every drone they lose now costs them far more than money. It costs them time, strategic initiative, and credibility with their proxy forces. Hezbollah and the Houthis, watching from afar, now see that the invincible swarm they were promised is being casually swatted away by American technology that costs almost nothing to operate. The laser systems have also changed the geometry of the battlefield. Traditional air defenses have engagement limits, limited missiles, limited launchers. Lasers do not. They can engage multiple threats in rapid succession, switching targets faster than any human operator could manage. In the recent engagement, lasers handled the low-altitude, slow-moving drones, while Aegis missiles dealt with the faster ballistic threats. The layered defense worked with terrifying efficiency. This is not just a tactical win. This is a strategic revolution. Iran's entire sea denial playbook relied on making the cost of engagement too high for the United States. That playbook has now been torn to pieces. The IRGC can no longer threaten to overwhelm American forces through sheer numbers because America no longer needs to match those numbers with expensive munitions. I can tell you with absolute confidence that the introduction of combat-proven, directed energy weapons in the Strait of Hormuz marks the beginning of the end for Iran's asymmetric advantage in this waterway. What they once saw as their trump card has become an expensive liability. And yet the IRGC's humiliation was not complete. Even as the drone swarm was being systematically destroyed by lasers, another nightmare was unfolding at sea level. The same American forces that neutralized the air threat also unleashed their AH-64 Apache helicopters against the IRGC's prized high-speed attack boats. Stay with me because what I'm about to describe turned what Iran hoped would be a decisive surface assault into a slaughter on the water. The IRGC's master plan for the Strait of Hormuz is not just failing, it is being dismantled piece by piece in real time. Even as the Iranian drone swarm was being incinerated by American lasers overhead, a different kind of nightmare unfolded at sea level. The AH-64 Apache attack helicopters emerged as the undisputed terror of the IRGC's high-speed boat fleet. Operating from nearby naval platforms and forward bases, these deadly gunships turned what Iran hoped would be a decisive surface assault into a one-sided slaughter on the waters of the Strait of Hormuz. I've reviewed the engagement footage and after-action summaries, and the effectiveness of the Apaches was nothing short of terrifying. While the destroyers and laser systems handled the aerial threats, the Apaches focused on the dozens of IRGC fast attack boats racing toward the American warships. Armed with AGM-114 Hellfire missiles and the M230 30mm chain gun, each Apache became a floating death sentence for the Iranian vessels. The scene was chaotic and one-sided. Iranian boats, many of them the heavily armed fast patrol craft the IRGC had spent years perfecting, tried to close the distance using their superior speed and numbers. They hoped to get within range to launch their own anti-ship missiles or even attempt suicide runs. But the Apaches never gave them the chance. From several kilometers away, the Apaches locked on with their advanced targeting systems. Hellfire missiles streaked downward with surgical precision, striking engine compartments and fuel tanks. Boats that moments earlier were racing at over 50 knots suddenly erupted into fireballs, their wreckage scattering across the sea. For the vessels that somehow survived the initial missile strikes, the Apaches closed in and unleashed the M230 chain gun, a devastating 30mm weapon that can fire over 600 rounds per minute. The high explosive incendiary rounds tore through the thin hulls of the Iranian boats like paper. I can tell you this with absolute confidence. Many IRGC crew members never even got close enough to fire a single shot. Dozens of high-speed boats were destroyed or disabled before they could reach effective firing range. The water around the American destroyers became littered with burning wrecks and drifting survivors. What Iran intended as a multi-axis swarm attack from both air and sea was systematically dismantled in real time. This Apache performance wasn't accidental. It was the result of years of training and integration between naval forces and Army aviation units. The helicopters operated under the protective umbrella of the destroyer's air defenses while exploiting the IRGC boats' greatest weakness, their lack of armor and advanced countermeasures. The fast boats that once terrified commercial shipping in the region were now easy targets for a platform specifically designed to destroy armored ground vehicles, let alone lightly armed patrol craft. The psychological impact on the IRGC cannot be overstated. Their swarm of speedboats doctrine, a cornerstone of their asymmetric naval strategy, has been exposed as obsolete. For years they trained and prepared for this exact scenario, using numbers and aggression to overwhelm a superior naval force. Instead, they watched their most mobile and prized assets turned into floating coffins under the relentless fire of American Apaches. This surface defeat, combined with the failure of the drone swarm and the earlier laser intercepts, delivered a triple blow to Iran's sea denial doctrine. The three pillars they relied upon most, cheap drones, ballistic and cruise missiles, and high-speed attack boats, were all neutralized in a single coordinated engagement. The IRGC's carefully constructed plan to dominate the Strait of Hormuz is no longer just under pressure. It is actively collapsing. Stay with me because, in the broader strategic picture, these devastating losses have pushed Iran to the brink of losing control over the Strait of Hormuz entirely. The once feared master of the strait is watching its power slip away faster than most analysts predicted. The cumulative damage from this single night of combat is now crystal clear. Iran is rapidly losing its grip on the Strait of Hormuz. For decades, the IRGC has built its entire regional power on one core doctrine, the ability to close or dominate the Strait of Hormuz at will. They called it sea denial. They promised their leadership, their proxies, and the world that this narrow waterway would always be their ultimate trump card. That doctrine is now collapsing in real time. I've been tracking every layer of this strategy, and what we are witnessing is the systematic dismantling of Iran's most important asymmetric advantage. The pillars they spent years and billions constructing have been shattered one by one in a matter of hours. First, the drone swarm, the cornerstone of their modern strategy, has been rendered almost useless. The combination of American lasers and Aegis missiles turned what Iran hoped would be an overwhelming numbers game into an expensive exercise in futility. Their cheap Shahed drones are now being destroyed at negligible cost. Second, their high-speed attack boat fleet, once feared as the swarm of speedboats, was decimated by AH-64 Apaches. Dozens of vessels that were supposed to deliver the knockout blow at close range never even reached firing distance. Their speed and aggression proved no match for American precision firepower. Third, the coastal radar network and command nodes that provided the eyes and brain for the entire operation were precision-bombed by F-35s. Bandar Abbas, Keshem, Minab, and Bandar Kamir are no longer functioning as effective command centers. The IRGC is now operating half-blind in its own backyard. Fourth, the logistical infrastructure that supported all these assets, fuel depots, munition storage, and forward staging areas, has been heavily degraded. Without reliable resupply and coordination, the IRGC's remaining forces are increasingly isolated and vulnerable. This is not a temporary setback. This is a structural failure of Iran's entire sea denial concept. The force that once boasted it could shut down 20% of global oil trade with a single command is now struggling to protect its own coastline. Even more damaging for Tehran is the regional response. The United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, long wary of Iran's threats, have quietly accelerated plans to bypass the Strait of Hormuz entirely. New pipelines and expanded east-west routes across the Arabian Peninsula are being brought online faster than expected. While these alternatives cannot fully replace the strait's capacity, they are enough to blunt the worst of any potential Iranian disruption. As a direct result, global oil prices have not skyrocketed in the dramatic way the IRGC had counted on. Instead of the 1970s-style energy shock they hoped would force the world to pressure America, markets have remained relatively measured. The fear premium Iran tried to create has been significantly smaller than anticipated. Their ultimate leverage is slipping away. I can tell you with absolute confidence, the Strait of Hormuz is no longer the unchallenged Iranian fortress it once was. What was supposed to be their greatest strength has become a theater where American technological superiority is on full display. Every failed attack further erodes the IRGC's credibility, not just with the outside world, but with their own people and their remaining regional proxies. The Revolutionary Guards are watching the very tool they believed would guarantee their power turn into a liability. Their doctrine is broken, their assets are burning, and their control over this critical choke point is fading with every passing hour. But the story is not over. Stay with me, because in the final part of this discussion, I'm going to deliver the strongest message yet, the one delivered directly by President Trump. His now famous description of the American strikes as a nice little love tap carries far deeper meaning than most people realize. It is both a warning and a statement of overwhelming capability. You will see exactly what America is signaling, why Iran's hardliners are still pushing for escalation despite these devastating losses, and what the dangerous next phase of this crisis could look like. The Strait of Hormuz is changing hands, not through occupation, but through technological dominance. And the IRGC is discovering too late that they are no longer the masters of these waters. The IRGC's nightmare in the Strait of Hormuz is far from over, and no one delivered that message more clearly than President Trump himself. In the aftermath of the devastating American counterstrike, Trump described the entire operation with characteristic bluntness. It was a nice little love tap. But make no mistake, those words were not casual. They were a deliberate, calculated message loaded with meaning. A love tap implies this was only the lightest, most restrained version of what America is truly capable of delivering. It was a warning wrapped in understatement. America showed precision and restraint not because it had to, but because it chose to. I've been following Trump's statements and the signals coming from the Pentagon closely. The message is unmistakable. What Iran experienced was the restrained, limited option. If the IRGC continues to escalate, the United States has far more destructive options ready. We are talking about potential deep strikes on Iranian industrial infrastructure, critical oil facilities, elements of the nuclear program, and senior IRGC command centers. The target list is long, and the capability to execute it is already in place. This love tap was not weakness. It was strength demonstrating control. America showed it can neutralize Iran's most aggressive moves while still holding back its full power. The IRGC now faces an impossible dilemma: continue attacking and risk a much heavier response, or back down and lose face in front of its own people and its regional proxies. Inside Iran, the situation is becoming increasingly tense. Hardline factions within the IRGC are still pushing for further escalation. They refuse to accept the reality that their drone swarms, fast boats, and coastal missile strategy have been systematically dismantled. Despite losing command nodes, radar installations, and dozens of assets in a single night, some commanders continue to call for revenge. They believe more aggression will somehow force America to retreat. But the moderates and pragmatists within the regime are watching with growing alarm. They see the technological gap widening dramatically. America's lasers, F-35 strikes, and Apache operations have exposed the limits of Iran's asymmetric warfare playbook. The hardliners' dreams of dominating the Strait of Hormuz are colliding with cold technological reality. This is no longer just a military confrontation. It is becoming a dangerous test of wills where time and escalation dominance heavily favor the United States. The Strait of Hormuz, once considered Iran's unbreakable fortress, is slipping from their control faster than anyone predicted. The IRGC's doctrine of sea denial lies in ruins. Their most advanced tactics have been neutralized by American innovation and precision. And now, even their own Gulf neighbors are quietly building alternatives to reduce their dependence on this critical waterway. What happens next will be decided by the choices Iran makes in the coming days. Will the hardliners double down and invite a much stronger American response? Or will cooler heads finally prevail and seek a way to de-escalate before the situation spirals out of control? One thing is certain. The era when Iran could threaten the world's energy lifeline with relative impunity is coming to an end. The love tap was only the beginning. So, what do you think? Does the IRGC still have any viable moves left in the Strait of Hormuz, or has their strategy completely collapsed? Will they escalate further despite the clear technological disadvantage? Or will internal pressure force them to step back? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you want to stay updated with this kind of detailed, no-fluff analysis on rapidly evolving global crises, Make sure to subscribe to Political Insight Live right now and turn on notifications. We're covering this situation hour by hour, and if you prefer listening to these deep dives as podcasts, the link is in the description. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. Our analysis doesn't stop here.